Okay. So we're calling to order the Policy Review Committee for October the 24th, 2024. And we'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Inca, Kamak, and Syilx people. And so we'd like to 2.1, adopt the minutes from July 25th meeting. For the minutes received or held on the July 25th, 2024 meeting to be adopted. Moved. Seconded. Okay, any questions or concerns? No? Carried. Great. Okay. Okay, so first order is that we have the memorial recognition and community enhancement policy to review. I don't know if there's really anything. Nope, do we have any discussion or comments on this one? Okay. I think Councillor Turning.
I'll go back to at the bottom, 10 years, we're only, and then they have to renew it. I have a real problem with the 10-year period. And then they have to purchase a replacement fixture for the same location and renew their tenure. I think that once the bench is there, the bench stays there until it's no longer usable in perpetuity. Yeah, and you know what? I know the other cities have the 10 years, but that doesn't mean we all have to jump off the same cliff just because the first 5 did. I just don't like the thought that someone's paid $3,000 for this bench, and then in 10 years we've got our hand out again. It seems to me we're just grabbing a little bit. And I would also like to look at, do we have to buy such expensive benches? You can get these recycled plastic chairs from Costco. I'm going to say $300. They may last 10 years. They're 40-year. I think they would. They're I don't know. It's a 40-year warranty in residential. So, I mean, maybe we just try it to begin with, because that would encourage more people to purchase it, because it's not such a extraordinary cost.
I think when we do things like that, we have to buy material that's durable to vandalism and to the elements, and that's the reason why we have the strong metal benches. But Councillor, did you know? Mayor.
So I have no vote on this. So one of the things about the cost of it is the 3,000 doesn't cover the prep, doesn't cover the pad, doesn't cover any of that.
Doesn't cover the plaque either.
No, it doesn't cover any of that.
No.
So the city then becomes the de facto paying the bill for it. So now the taxpayers start paying for it.
Yeah.
So at some point in time, there has to be some cost put into it. Now, some communities go 5 years on debenture. A lot go 10, but most go 5. And then they give the person the option to come back into it if they so choose. If not, the plaque is removed and given back to them. It's just the way it is. Now, we sat on council when we discussed the benches along the riverside and everything else like that. And we had to go with something that couldn't be cut or set on fire. And that's exactly what we had to do, because the benches that we had before then were kind of like you were saying. And they were set on fire, or they were just completely cut in half on a weekend just because somebody wanted to be a jackass. Mm-hmm. So we went to a more durable bench, and it has to be durable. Now, maybe the CAO can fill in on this, but I do believe that Barkman's benches are equally as tough but cheaper than what we've been buying in the past. So I'll just leave it there.
Great. CAO.
So there's a few things we've been discussing over the last little bit about this particular policy and planning going forward. So as the mayor said, the cost of the bench is all that they're covering. The bench life expectancy is 10 to 15 years before it has to be replaced. We've confirmed that with Public Works, as well as probably twice a year on average, they are having to clean the whole bench to remove graffiti. That does not, again, that doesn't include pad prep, it doesn't include installation. If it's a memorial tree, it doesn't include any of the care and uptake of that. Doesn't even include the cost of actually planting the tree in the ground, digging a hole and planting the tree in ground. There's no staff cost covered. It just covers the cost of the purchase of the item. When we are purchasing things like benches, what we're hoping to have, and we don't currently have, is we have every few years, there becomes a new theme for the city, right? And so benches are purchased within a theme, or garbage cans are purchased within a theme. And then you get this hodgepodge of things out there in the downtown and along the trails where nothing's really cohesive in its look. And that's something we want to try to avoid, is having lots of different styles of things. The other thing we want to think about is every time somebody adds a piece of infrastructure to the community, a bench is a piece of infrastructure, a picnic table, a tree, it's all pieces of infrastructure that we have to then maintain. There is a cost every time we do that. So it might be worthwhile, instead of having the ability for people to put a bench where they choose, to have benches within a planned area that become available for to have memorials put on them. So there are benches in places that nobody ever uses. And we're still required to maintain them because we don't want them to look bad. We want to make sure the grass is cut around them. We want to make sure the concrete's not breaking. We want to make sure there's not graffiti on them. So every time we do that, there's an incremental cost to the organization, one, to replace the bench, or two, to maintain the bench. It might not have been something we would have chosen within our financial plan to do. And so as we move towards doing the placemaking project, where we look at what do we want our amenities to look like? How do they represent the city, and where do they go? Right? It might be worthwhile, before rushing to make any new changes to this one, is to think about, how do we want memorialization to happen? You know, what kinds of benches do we want? We are currently using ones that are recycled plastic. Yeah, and those are commercially, but they're commercial grade. We purchased them from. I mean, I actually had a picnic table up north that was made of concrete, and somebody took a large chunk of wood and smashed it. So people will do stupid things, no matter what we want, right? But we want to make sure that we're not just putting amenities out for the sake of putting amenities out, because it does continue to be an ongoing cost to the city. So I wonder if council would like to look at an actual plan for that.
My other concern is what happens when they get vandalized. I mean, if they do get vandalized, they have to be replaced within that 10-year. Is the donor, okay, the city, okay.
I have no problem having an area like. If you
No,
go to
it's me.
Asuyas. Oh, I didn't hear your name called.
Sorry.
So just to point out, and Cynthia and I had this conversation this morning, I use the pool a lot. And you see those little blue plaques of the benches, half of them no longer exist. Half of those businesses are no longer here. So it's time to pull those plaques down and find new venture people. But case in point is, replacing it every 10 years for a business that no longer exists. Like Brian Defoe is still there. Chinatown Ginseng, they don't exist anymore. There's no company so they would have to go to new ones. So you wouldn't automatically have. So I think after 10 years, you give the people the opportunity to renew or not. But, I think, and I explained this to Cynthia, our CAO, this morning, I think we're losing some dollars over at the pool because we still have not taken a lot of those plaques down and replaced them with people that are actually in the community. So
Personally, I don't think anybody would even question if we took it down after 10 years, but what do you think, Councillor?
Take what, down a bench?
Well, no, like at the pool.
Oh, the plaque?
Plaques after.
Well, you know what? Okay, we're on a different spiel, but, I sit up at the hospital at emergency whenever I go up there, and I read those every time. And maybe some of those donations were made 15 years ago, but you know what? I still appreciate seeing who contributed that money. So, they contributed money to that facility. And I don't think that after 10 years, we should forget that. Maybe we can put them over in another area and put Current up there. But, you know, as I say, I go up there and every time I read the same things and I think, oh yeah, that's really nice. And, I don't know if they update their list, if they get more endowments up there or not, I'm not too sure. But, I can see keeping their names, but maybe in a different and having more current donors up there. I have no problems with that. But to go back to what you were saying of having an area where benches go, I think that's probably a more feasible idea than having a bench here, 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 and here for maintenance if they're all in one area. Like I look at Asuyas, there's one little park there. They've got numerous benches. You know, you can go out down to the water, you're in the park area, you've got the trees, you've got the grass, and you can go around and I snoop and read every bench. And so that's in an area and it's easy to maintain.
Yeah.
So maybe we find in Rotary Park somewhere or a Central Park or wherever where we have a memorial area and you can have your trees there, you can have your benches there. You could have a bike rack if someone wants to donate a bike rack. You could have a bike rack there. If someone wants to donate a flower pot, you could have a flower pot. And so we don't necessarily have to be restricted to benches and trees. We could make our memorial garden a lot of things. And I think the maintenance there would be a lot better because it's concentrated.
I think, yeah. Valid point.
Is it me again? Oh, it's me again. Your point on the plastic at the pool. When you come into the pool, there's the machine and then there's the big, with all of the gold donors, platinum donors. There's room in there that we could take those blue plaques and then put them in there as past donors and put them all down. Because if I'm going to debenture a lane, I don't want to compete with somebody else that's no longer in business. I want my name there. So I think we could definitely make sure that those old donors are still recognized.
I agree with that. CEO.
Yeah, so I think, you know, the idea of when we develop a amenities landscaping plan, so benches, picnic tables, picnic gazebos, flower areas, those sorts of things, right? You know, and it could be in one central location or it could be along the pathways and, you know, different things like that. There are a lot of options. I was speaking to the supervisor for parks this morning and we were talking about, because she's taking on a lot of this work around figuring out where some of the trees are that have been donated, that the plaques were covered or washed away during the flood. We don't necessarily know which tree was donated by whom, right? So, and those kinds of plaques, like the ones on the trees, are relatively easy to steal. But maybe having a centralized, you know, in a particular park, having a centralized place where, you know, tree donations are identified or whatever, so that they're harder to take. You know, they're there for a longer period of time. And yeah, if somebody else decides they want to sponsor a bench that's now available, but you know, so-and-so had sponsored it originally, and they're going to put the new bench in, like there's ways for us to keep those memories in a more cohesive way, I think. That allows us to continue to maybe garner sponsorships, because it doesn't have to be in memoriam. It could just be sponsored by a bench, right? If a local business wanted to sponsor a bench downtown, we wouldn't turn them away. But having the opportunity to sort of formalize or memorialize the donation in a much more artistic kind of way, and it will last longer.
Just a shrub, whatever, like rose bushes. I've seen the rose, but we can't have roses here. And all it is just a stick with a little plastic plaque on it.
Mhm.
And so it's not a brass plaque where someone's gonna come and steal it,
Mhm.
but it says, you know, in memory of blah, 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 and there's the rose bush. Now, we could obviously come up with something else, so it doesn't have to be, you know, trees or whatever.
Yeah.
Hmm?
It's still it anyways. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And I mean, we have an invasive species included in the list, so we have to get that off the list, right? We have to make sure, like, so for plants and trees, we have an invasive species. Got to get that off the list. But if council might be willing or open to it, I would recommend that we adjourn this particular one to later, once we started doing some of the placemaking work. So we can find ways to make, to choose the benches or whatever we're gonna include, and the places where we think we need stuff that makes sense to the community in the long run.
I would like to have in like Rotary Park, a nice area that could be added on to, and it would be a nice memorial park.
A nice seating area for people to
Yeah.
come visit.
Yeah.
Right around
Kinda
the road,
good.
right around the Rose Garden.
Yes.
Well, it ties in with the parks and it's not just sports use, then it could be people for a walk and sitting on the bench and enjoying their
Yeah.
coffee or whatever. Yeah, that would be nice, actually. And we could table this for finding out more information. That's fine. A lot's not gonna happen this winter, but
Again, I have no vote on this, but one of the things that I would like to maybe suggest is we're looking at the bench for the lady who passed away in the fire. We're talking about Brock Hedrick would like us to donate or name something after the RCMP that were killed in the shootout. I think if we do that kind of thing, those never change. I don't think after 10 years, we pull those names off those benches. I think that's the part where we have like a in perpetuity memorial for those people that have gone just that little bit of extra mile. So I would hate to see after 10 years, Carrie's family have to go, gee, are we gonna, yeah, so I think when we do have that kind of thing, when we're doing it for somebody that has given their life in service and we recognize them, I would like to see that. Again, a wrinkle that I'm throwing in, sorry about that, but that's just my thought.
Take down the cenotaph. It's the same kind of thing, right? We would never take names off the cenotaph. I mean, stop that. I think that's that would be, again, that wouldn't be necessarily this program or it wouldn't necessarily, it might be a subset of this program in which council is memorializing somebody versus somebody choosing to memorialize a family member because this was their favorite place to sit. It's a very different level of memorialization, right?
I think, yeah. We do have Fairleigh Park for the firefighters, yeah, in the. Yeah, we could have benches there too. The great park near the school, yeah. So we'll table that. I guess, do we need to vote on that? Or is it just note it for tabling for? Okay, so there we go. We'll bring it back. All right, so on to new business. City of Merritt Parks Regulation Bylaw 2054, 2008. So this is the one where we have the consolidation. I was trying to go through this one and see, was there an attachment that we were supposed to have
I think this. I think this revolves around 4.6.
Okay. Because this one seemed to have we don't have a 4.6 on this.
Yeah.
In each grad.
This is the one where 2054, right?
Yeah,
I can.
please.
So we received some legal advice, after, once the encampments outside of in the Desert Inn really started to become very problematic. We got a legal opinion about some of our actions that we could take as well as our current camping bylaw, because we are required under the provincial legislation to provide a place for people to shelter overnight if there are not sufficient shelter spaces. So, there's a whole bunch of legal BC Supreme Court kind of stuff around this that we don't want to get into right now. But what we were looking for and the updates that the recommended by our legal counsel was to put some requirements around the size of the space you were using. So we've had places, tents that are very large and they've had stuff around them. Which again, that becomes very disorderly. It's not attractive. if somebody was able to keep their things in a tent that was in good shape and they didn't have things spewing out, it might be less offensive to people in the area. There's also some issues around tenters who are connecting to other tents with tarps and the extreme fire hazard that that causes. So I can't remember which section. Do you know what section? That there was around that, as well as we were told by legal that the court is now looking at longer timelines, that 8 at night to 7 in the morning is no longer or 8 in the morning is no longer acceptable, or 9 o'clock at night, what it was before, but so having to extend that time a little bit. No, our legal counsel saying this is what the courts are now. The courts are now making rulings that having an overnight sheltering area that starts at 9 and ends at 7 in the morning is insufficient. And once they, they set precedent, then we all have to follow precedent, correct? Like that's.
So do we have the new suggestion there? Because like we see the definitions of the 8 AM or the 9 PM to 8 AM.
7 PM in
Or
the
7 PM, yeah,
4.6.2.
0.6, yeah, any tent erected
Mhm.
may not be erected earlier than 7 PM on the day is constructed and removed by the.
So they, and the courts have made some rulings around 7 PM to 10 AM.
10 AM.
So we're kind of trying to push back on that a little bit with the 8 AM. So we really want to, that's kind of where we're at with that is some adjustments around.
Well,
Yeah.
and the reason that I would prefer to leave it at 8 AM is some of these parks might be used by schools or activities or things like that. And schools normally are in operation by 8:30 or 9 o'clock, depending on where it is.
Mhm.
Maybe not a lot of our parks, but they could be. Because even Fairleigh Park is near MSS and I mean, it's a little bit of a walk to Claybank, but even Bow Park from Central, but because I mean, if we're having parks, right now, people maybe are tenting in or have been at Nequala Park, but what if they extend to other parks right now? Anyway.
Well, and ultimately that's the situation, is that Nequala Park is the only park that you have that has been authorized by
Yeah.
by a council.
That was done 2 years ago, yeah.
And so no one is permitted to shelter in any other park overnight. However, RCMP will not decamp people
From other parks,
from anywhere
okay.
with, because that's a bylaw issue. They won't enforce our bylaw. So the only time we can decamp people is when we have bylaw working.
Even if people call in on the weekend to the RCMP where people are camping out in vacant homes, they
Can't,
won't do that because.
well, I shouldn't say that. If it was private property, they may,
Yeah.
if the owner of the property, only if the owner of the property is
Complain.
calling in for,
Yeah.
and they might for trespassing, and depending on the time of night, it could be trespass by night.
Yeah.
Which is a criminal offense. However, for public parks and things where people are camping, they're not going to decamp.
So I don't know who was first.
So I'm going to soapbox here just for a second. I've asked for this to come forward because I think Nequala Park is probably the worst park to have for tenting. I don't agree that we should have tenting in the middle of our community. It's not a good situation. I also believe that we need to start working with the provincial government for them to stop downloading this issue upon us and start coming up with some real plans, such as crown land given to communities where we can erect a proper place for people to either camp or live in the tiny homes. I've done some research. The 1.9 million that has gone to Knights Inn could have come to us. We could have, if they'd have given us 10 acres, we could have housed close to 150 people in the pallet homes for life rather than this. So there's got to be what I'm doing here, or what I'm hoping to do here, is to push the provincial government to start taking some responsibility. But we cannot have tenting. And the part that gets me is the tenters know the rules, but they refuse to follow them. And the tents never come down without force or our bylaw telling them they have to bring it down. So again, if you want to be part of the community and you want a tent there, please follow the rules and no one will bother you. But if you can't follow the rules, you will be bothered. There was a lot of problems with the pickleball people. There was a lot of problems with the apartment people. There was a lot of problems with Nicola Meadows. So I would like to find another spot that we designate. And we do have some other spots that we're talking about, but I think that is probably the worst park we could possibly be using at this point in time. And the main thing here is the fact to get province, whether we have a new government or whatever, to start considering other avenues to help cities combat this problem, because it's only getting worse. And we need to have some guidance and we need to have some rules set out. I don't know if you caught the story this morning, but Crab Park is now
Yep.
got 7 people left in it and they're shutting it down.
Yep.
So this was a park that was taken over, redone the way that it should be done, with houses separated, with the whole bit. And it comes right down to the fact that people don't want to follow the rules in these parks and no
And
one's using them.
5 of those 7 refused housing.
But again,
was
you're
that?
going to get that. There are people that are going to do that. So
Yeah.
the fact of the matter is we need some provincial guidance on how this is going to work, and we need to find another spot rather than the Koala Park.
Agree. Councillor Train.
I agree totally with Mike. Could I do a few housekeeping rules before I start? So 3.4 marijuana is with a J, not with an H. Marijuana. 4.6, something went wrong there. So it should read, no person shall erect, construct, or build in any park. Because you got no person shall erect, construct, or build, or cause to be created. Or erect, I've crossed out, so I can't read it. Constructed or built in, on any park. Yes.
In or on.
Yeah. But it does, you've redundant it.
No, no.
No, build, comma, in or on.
So when we say construct or allow to be constructed, those are 2 different actions. So no person can construct it, nor can any other person allow it to be constructed. So I can't say you go over there and put your tent up.
Okay, then you better put your commas in there, or built in, comma, or, comma, on, or in or on any park boulevard.
Mhm.
Yeah. And now what about city property? Besides a park or boulevard, like we've got that, we have city properties by Save On.
It has to be.
Okay, but do we not have to be more specific in here?
No,
to
we
make
don't,
sure we
because
don't?
we've defined park as we've defined the Koala Park as the only place you can. And if you do it anywhere else, any other place, that you can't. But this again, I'll get Linda to look at that and we'll
Okay.
In,
And then on 4.7, second last sentence, you're talking about no person. So unless he, so if you're gonna do he, you have to do slash she or they.
should be they. We
And
don't do
then
she anymore.
change, okay, cause then you've got have. Where you had he have valid written. So if you're gonna leave it a he, then it's has.
No,
But
it's
if you're gonna go
it should they,
they,
definitely be
it's gonna
they.
go have. Okay, got that out of the way.
Yeah.
And I don't know about 4.12, no person shall smoke at or in a park. Isn't that the same thing? In a park? Isn't that at a park, in a park?
It might be some sort of legal
Yeah,
jargon.
okay, I just,
Yeah,
but I had highlighted Naquala Park too. I would really like to get a different location for that. It's 4.6.1.
it's in the definition too of Naquala Park, I think is.
Yeah,
So,
Want to.
no, you have to provide a space, so you can't remove Naquala Park until you provide an alternative.
Yeah.
and I mean, just to interject, the reason that we had that was because the shelter was there, and last term, the way by putting hours in there, we had could send the bylaw in there to shut down the tents and have them go away and then come back at nighttime. And that was really kind of the only option we were presented. And that was 2.5 years ago, and life has changed. But
Yeah.
at the time, that was the best of the word, like best of the bad situation that we could deal
Yeah,
with.
I think in this case, this is not something you need to approve today to go to
That's
council.
what I was just gonna ask.
Because
that.
ultimately, I think what we need is some direction from you of where you'd like us to go with changing the location. I see that Linda did not include the size of the tent in
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
which
I
I thought
saw
she
that.
did for some reason. I think a draft I saw did. So if you would like us to do that as well as
Yeah.
contain some of those things that are in some of the other municipal bylaws and so kind of giving us that direction to take this park section of the parks bylaw, because it is a bigger bylaw, and address moving the overnight sheltering location and that sort of thing. So,
But I mean, also we would have to know what our options would be.
yeah, we don't know 100% what those are yet. And some of the ones that we've floated to other organizations in the community have met with very negative feedback, but that doesn't preclude you from making those decisions. Because quite honestly, sometimes if it's not perfect, they're gonna give us negative feedback, whether we're doing our best or not.
What are some of the locations?
We had talked about up at the airport, because we have some recently upgraded areas up there. We had talked about closer to like the TNRD side. Side. Just over the line would be nice. We have some private land that we've talked to a couple of people about as well. So it's still really up in the air, but I think the first is, do you want us to explore these options? Do you want me to invest time in exploring these options?
I think we would like that, especially knowing that the shelters moved. I think people in that area would appreciate if we were to move that, since they've
And they
already had
won't
the
take
last few.
tents, will they?
They will not take tents, no. And so the mayor of Campbell River had sent a letter to the BC Housing, to the Minister of BC Housing, with the same concept that ultimately, why are you not giving us Crown land, which is within the municipal boundaries, to allow them to use that as a shelter area? And we provided a letter of support as well to the same concept that the mayor sent to the minister as well. So that there's Crown land. Why does it have to be a developed city park?
Mhm.
So I guess on that note, I think we're all in agreement that we'd like to see what
I
the
think
options
Councillor
are.
Egan had a.
No, I'm just leaving mine on like everybody else.
Did you have,
No, I'm in agreement. We need more information though, like other,
Yeah.
like options.
And the only thing that I'll put forward is that it could possibly, the park that we're talking about in the future could become the tennis courts at some point in time. So that will eventually, that park will be used for something else, and we will have to find a spot anyway.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if any of you saw the letter, but the tennis club is concerned about the two courts they're using now that are rapidly deteriorating. So we're gonna have to start looking, and most likely that is either that or Central Park. There's a real possibility we could be putting the tennis courts in that area. So we're gonna have to pull it out of the rotation at some point anyway.
good to know. So I guess, yeah, we'll get more information on their options, and tent sizes are the key sizes that we all want. I think everybody's in agreement there. That's right, yeah. That's right, yeah. So, yeah, I guess now we can move on to 4.2 loitering bylaw, but there's not,
There's nothing here on Lord.
I don't see.
What is,
So I'll just kind of address it real quick. So what has happened is every month I have a meeting with the RCMP, the mayor RCMP meetings, and we talk about certain issues. And one of the issues that has been cropping up lately is the, I don't want to say violence, but the aggression at Spirit Square. We've got, now this is not the group that this is a different group that associates with the group, and I don't want to use the term, but they have become a different breed of character. The RCMP now go and ask them to move on, and these people know their rights. They refuse to leave. Now, the RCMP suggests we put up a no loitering bylaw, then they can ask these people to move and point to the sign and get them to move. Now, I think we'll have to do some looky-loo into this, is I've checked into a lot of other communities, under Canadian human rights, no loitering bylaws are not illegal, but they are not enforceable. It's the same, there's nothing different than two people who are homeless talking about something for 25 to 30 minutes on a bench and two grandmas shading pictures of their grandkids. There's nothing different there. So most communities have tried this, but with some suggestion from the RCMP, if there is a no loitering with a time limit, you have 15 minutes here, you have 20 minutes here, then that is something they can use. So I guess what we want this group to do is consider what a no loitering bylaw would look like, because the RCMP are tied to remove anybody, hands are tied to remove anybody out of Spirit Square or anywhere else for that matter that's causing an issue. We have to give them the ability to see that there's a sign that says no loitering. And this was something that was vogue probably back in the 80s and late 70s, early 80s. And I think with Canadian human rights, it kind of was moved out. But there's also a situation where I feel that taxpayers have the right to enjoy what they have paid for without being, their ears assaulted by somebody who's having a bad day on something. So Spirit Square also is the gateway to Black's Pharmacy and all the others, and he is losing business and other businesses are losing business because of what's going on down there. So I guess what I would like this committee to do is not today, and with staff help, is find out what legally can be done as far as no loitering situation where the RCMP can then act and get someone to move. That's why it's here.
Here I have some research.
Okay.
So when you draft a bylaw and pass a bylaw, the bylaw can only be passed for the intent for which you have drafted it. So loitering bylaws and panhandling bylaws are particularly challenging bylaws because they're often drafted with a specific population in mind. So as the mayor said, if somebody's sitting on a bench for 15 minutes talking to themselves, or somebody's sitting on a bench for 15 minutes having coffee, they're equally loitering. Right? So you can't discriminate against one population within a bylaw. It won't stand up in court. It's not constitutional. So we have to make sure that when we do bylaws, we're very cautious and aware of all bylaws must apply to all residents equally.
But if they're not behaving properly.
So this is where the problem comes in, and this is where I don't want to discredit the RCMP, but we have been told that they will not enforce our bylaws. The RCMP have the power to remove, under the criminal code, cause a disturbance, any person who is intoxicated in a public space, being aggressive, verbally abusive, using foul language, all under the cause of disturbance section of the Criminal Code of Canada. They also have the ability to arrest and remove people under the Liquor Control Act for being intoxicated in public. You do not in fact need a loitering bylaw for them to manage the people at Spirit Square. They already have the tools in place under federal and provincial legislation, which has a higher standing than municipal bylaw. So they should actually be enacting those particular sections of those acts, not the loitering bylaw, because they may choose not to enforce our bylaw. And the more complicated that we make our bylaw, as the suggestion, you can only sit here for 5 minutes and you can only sit there for 20 minutes. Again, you're choosing areas where you know certain groups of people are loitering. So you're still targeting a certain group and you're making it more complex when you're trying to enforce it. So if the RCMP, let's say we get a different staff sergeant and he says, that new staff sergeant says, no, we're not enforcing the municipal bylaw, then our municipal bylaw officers are left with a complicated bylaw to enforce. So I disagree. I think it's not in the community's best interest to have a loitering bylaw because the police already have two higher level tools to enforce public decorum and they're not using them. And we may not have consistent use of the bylaw from the RCMP because we've already been told they're not going to enforce noise bylaw. They're not going to decamp people. So there's a number of things that they're already not doing. So to say that we will consistently get this from them, I think is a risk that I don't think the city should take. That's my opinion.
So that really bothers me. I have had firsthand experience of the RCMP totally ignoring something. I mean, 5 feet away from open use of alcohol and the cop is in his car and he's. I phoned Mike that day and, you know, it really ticks me that they make our town look scuzzy. And they're not doing anything about it. Do we not have the say in saying, Josh, we want Spirit Square, we want all of downtown. We don't want to see open alcohol. We don't want to be spitting on sidewalks. If people swearing and abusive language and behavior. Can we not ask him to address those situations? Do we not have that right, Mike?
So we pay for the RCMP. One of the things that I learned when Neil Menard was the mayor, when we went down to see the justice minister, and CAO, correct me if I'm wrong, we had some questions like this. And the justice minister said to Neil, you are the top cop, you are the boss. You can decide to a certain degree with them what you'd like to see in your city. We came back and Neil started doing that. Now, we, 2-3 months ago, passed a situation where it was a pour out in Spirit Square and in the city limits. We already said that. Now, the RCMP have been doing it, but they don't, you got to remember, they're down 6 members at this point in time. And what the CIO has just said, I would need that for the next meeting so I can present it to the RCMP and say, Keith, here you go. You can do this. We don't need to be part of this anymore. And then we will make sure that that's exactly what's going to happen. Yeah, we'll keep their feet to the fire. It's our job to. This is our highest cost of taxpayers' dollars, and we need to get every ounce of it out of them. Because it's real simple. If it's not going to happen, then we'll cut. Then we'll cut. If we can't get what we want, why do we need all these police officers? Maybe we cut 3. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And that's why I kind of brought this forward, was to find out what we can do. And the CAO has said what's there. So I'll make sure that staff sergeant and the acting staff sergeant now know that they have every right to go ahead and move forward and do whatever they need to, not just Spirit Square, but within the city limits. So there should be no more questions, and we should have, I mean, you can't expect them to be everywhere, and they're not going to be. So at least now we know where we stand on that. And I'll just pull that off the agenda, because if that's the way it is, I'll make sure they know it and we'll move on from there.
And I mean, I don't want to be a racist, but it's one particular group of individuals. They're constantly, they're at Spirit Square, or they're down by the fitness gym, or they're down by the Royal Bank. Can we not work with the first?
Well, you'll notice that they're not down at the gym anymore because we removed the bench. The bench is gone.
But they're sitting on the, still sitting
No.
on their barrier.
Yeah,
Barrier.
but it's not as
Yes.
bad as it was. But
Yes.
the point of the matter, and that's why when we've talked to BC Housing and stuff, and I've mentioned this to the CAO, we want to have people in that shelter locally first. And if we have any local First Nations, we would like the bands to be involved with who's in the shelter to help them with their needs and possibly help them get better. So we would like that involvement as well.
And it involved, like, I know in Spirit Square, there's 3 or 4 that are the same individuals there all the time. And the First Nations not work with them and.
Again, it's like anything else, Wendy, if they choose, it's the same thing as if you offer a nice spot in a shelter to somebody where it's warm and everything, but you have to follow rule A 1, 2, and 3, and they choose not to. You cannot force them to do anything they want. They've chosen a lifestyle. And that's why we would like to see more involvement from all groups. Now, I'll be honest with you. Some of these people that we're seeing right now are here because of the 2.5 decrypt. They can't do this in their province, so they're here. A lot, not all of them, but quite a few of them are not from here. Some are transitioning from here to the east side right now. And you see this crime wave every year about this time, because what they're trying to do is get money together to get to the east side of Vancouver, because it's warmer there. And this happens every year at this time, every year. So the 2.5 decrim has brought some issues to us that we've asked the government to have a look at. And it's put a lot of it's taken a lot of things away from the RCMP that they can do. They can no longer do search and seizure. They can no longer kick in a door because everybody's allowed to have 2.5 milligrams, right? So, and and I'm getting off track on this, but the point of the matter is we have asked that when we do start to have people that are being housed in the shelter, if they are from one of the 6 bands in the valley, we would like some representation of the bands to be involved with their people and work with us to help them. And I think that's what we're going to be working towards, because I think that's part of the MOU that we are starting to talk about the MOU situation again. And I think that's part of the MOU that we have to have, is where we have to have each nation buy in to help us with what's going on. Because I don't know a lot of the traditional rights and everything like that. And I always introduce myself as a colonial, because I am. So I can't pretend to guess that I know what these people are going through or what their traditional knowledge is. I don't know. But somebody from their band would be able to help us out with that. And I think, there's certain people in town that we could use, Richard Jackson being one of them. I think would be able to help us, because he does run it's called something Warriors About. I've been invited to speak twice, where people who are trying to get better First Nations, he hosts a deal with them. So I think there'll be some tools for that, but there are some people that will never stop. They just like their life as it is.
So on that note, then, is our next approach maybe just to speak at the next police committee meeting?
Well, when we can speak, so when I meet with Keith, because Josh is up until 12th, I'll meet him probably on the 4th of November. I will present what Cynthia, our CAO, has said tonight to him and let him know that there's nothing holding you back from clearing Spirit Square at any point in time.
Because I think we all agree, I think we share a lot of these comments. We're worried about safety of citizens, but also at the same time, we want to be respectful of the First Nations culture or culture of whomever. And that's important to everybody. So we want to do it respectfully. CAO?
I think it's also important when we're talking about something like a loitering bylaw is that you tell people to move on. Where are they going to go? They're going to go from loitering in one place to loitering in another place, because there are no day programs, right? And that's something that somebody in the provincial government needs to take a responsibility for, because it's certainly not a municipal service. But we can have sheltering in the night at the shelter, but people who have addictions issues, who are maybe housed but are hanging out downtown, or aren't housed and are hanging out downtown, under the influence, there's no program for them to go. There's no safe space for them to go to that's indoors, that's not technically loitering. So until some of these problems are solved, we can't move people on, because they're just going to go to the next place.
But aren't a lot of these people in Spirit Square? I mean, by 6 o'clock, they're gone. So they're somewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know where they are, but they're usually gone by 6 o'clock.
Yeah, and some of them may be housed, but we just don't know that dynamic, right? But making an assumption that they have somewhere to go might actually cause more problems, because they'll just find another place to loiter.
Yeah.
So it's better for us if they are, dealt with in a more, I mean, I don't like to see anybody taken into custody, but ultimately, if they're unable to act in a civilized way in the community, in public, then maybe they're not in a condition to be out and about. And the loitering bylaw doesn't change that fact. But arresting under cause of disturbance, or arresting under the, being intoxicated in public under the Liquor Control Act, might actually be beneficial.
But they just out again anyway.
But yes, but maybe somebody, again, this is an opportunity for maybe somebody to say, oh my God, I need you to take me to the hospital. I need to see a counselor. I need to, we just don't know when that one thing will be enough to provide that impetus for somebody to seek support.
Change. Yeah.
So this is the first steps, I think, where as a council, we need to let the provincial government know. We need to see some sort of a plan on this as we move forward. I mean, we've seen communities like Kelowna could be completely taken over. Vernon is on the edge of it. There has to be some help from the provincial government. And CAO is right. Where do they go? So what plan are we coming up with here? We've got to have something. In the past, out at Rayleigh, they had that large farm where people could go get better, learn how to farm. They farm potatoes, they farm corn, they farm cabbage. And you could go, they were all over the place at one point in time. Now there's nothing for anyone. So this is where the province now has to decide that, yeah, we have a problem. How can we work with communities to make this better? And I think if we come up with some plans and we present it and we say, hey, let's work together on this. I think us just saying, oh, we got to move the loiterers on. I get that, but that's correct. Where do they go now? So now they go from Spirit Square to, down by the United Church, or maybe they go now down to one of the school playgrounds, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I think we have as much work to do to get ready to present something to the province where we can say, we need you to start doing something. You can't keep downloading and turning a blind eye to what's happening in our communities, and you can't do it anymore because they've done it for far too long. So we need some action. I mean, we have a minister of mental health and addictions that should be addressing this problem, but has never addressed it. So, and that's why we need to prod these ministers to start doing something to fix this.
And I think we have to work with the First Nations too, because if they're coming from the reserve and they're coming into town to sit in Spirit Square all day, then we have to work with that band to say, we can't have them in Spirit Square or we're here there all day long, creating a problem.
Well, there's also other things, like I know that there's some underage kids that are there that are non-First Nations that need their mom and dads need to come home and say, we need to take care of you. I had a gentleman send me an email last week letting us know that he's very upset with council that we're inhuman, that we're not getting the shelter open quickly than it is, and he's worried about his son being left out in the cold. And I told him, first of all, we don't control the shelters, and have you offered him a room at your house? In other words, take the first step to house your own son. Don't leave it on the taxpayers to do it. And if it's very easy to blame city and city council for every single thing that goes wrong, but we don't control the shelter. And I also asked, has he gone to register? Because that's how you get in. You register, right? So I haven't heard back, but the first step is this is your son. You help him. Don't expect us to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, tough conversation.
No, it's not tough. It's not tough. It's time that
Tough for us.
you take the Band-Aid off. I mean, you've got a family member that needs your help. Is it your family member?
No.
Take responsibility.
I have driven one of my family members to 26 rehabs, 26. And I take him every single time hoping for better. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
So for our topic.
So I'm
The end result.
gonna pull the loitering because I was not aware of that. So if we already have a situation where the RCMP can deal with it,
Yeah.
then we're just spinning our wheels. So I'll just
Okay.
pull it.
All right, and we can always discuss it in that week's committee meeting. Okay. So now we're on to 4.3, country music artist murals. And we have the information there and I recommend, yeah. So we have
I make a
an option.
motion that we remove it.
Yeah, I don't think there's too many murals going up on any buildings.
Yeah.
Not since 15 years ago, maybe.
That we referred to council to have it be rescinded.
Okay.
Agreed.
Could somebody
Okay.
just update me on this? Sorry, I didn't.
Murals.
Yeah, I know. I just don't know what we're doing.
Yeah,
Sorry.
we have
Application fee for murals
a policy that's.
Yeah. since 2006.
Can you hit her, Mike?
Oh, pardon me, sorry.
We have a policy that's obviously been around for a long time with regards to the country music artist murals.
Okay.
And we're just taking it off because otherwise we have to continue to review it
Okay.
periodically. So it's
And
kind of a defunct policy now.
Okay.
if we're doing, yeah, we would do.
And
it
those
differently.
murals, if they're on a store, they cannot paint over those murals, can they?
Not without her permission.
Okay, so are we gonna vote then to move this to council? Then? Any other comments? No. Okay, so we'll move that to council. So the vote was to move that to council, so now we're on to 4.4, court good neighbor bylaw. And I don't know if CAO, you want to introduce that since we have options there.
So we have identified a few other issues.
I don't.
With the neighbor bylaw. We had brought this forward to you previously. And you had some or things you wanted us to change. One of them was motor vehicle, the derelict vehicle versus how many vehicles that are unregistered. So that's been changed to 2, from 1 to 2 as requested. Unsightly, the definition of unsightly, and those regulations. So anything basically in red here. Just some housekeeping stuff there. I think the biggest section that we've added since last you saw this was with regards to boulevard and laneway maintenance. So we don't actually have anywhere in our bylaws that requires that boulevard and laneway maintenance of our residents. So we wanted to make sure that was in there. We also wanted to talk about, as part of our work to be more physically accessible to people, we want to make sure that there are no encroachments on the sidewalk. So shrubbery or trees that hang over onto sidewalks that make it challenging for people in, with mobility devices or who have more poor mobility to be able to navigate on the sidewalk without those things getting in their way. So the bylaw officers did a big push on shrubs this year. However, we had a lot of pushback from people about cutting their shrubs that were growing over the sidewalks, or people who are letting large weeds grow from their yard over the sidewalk, right? That is their responsibility to make sure that those are cut so that our sidewalks and our trails are not being obscured so people with mobility issues can't get on them. We had also done the vacant buildings section, which you guys had approved. We're going to be bringing a fee forward that will go in our rates and fees bylaw. So that's why we don't have one on here.
Personally, one concern that I had with vacant dwelling was I just wanted to make sure that we have a difference between vacant or maybe unoccupied, simply because you will have people who vacation away with intent of returning.
Oh yeah, that's not.
So that's not the city's definition of vacant.
No, it's empty, not rented, not.
And with recreation vehicle, because the definition is broad, my only concern when reading this is what I found was maybe a person has a motorhome and then they have 2 ATVs, which by definition, a recreational vehicle could be considered an ATV. And then how about, the utility trailer, right? Yeah. So you have your utility trailer for your dump run, then you have your 2 ATV vehicles, which is 2 and
snowmobile.
3, and then maybe you do have a snowmobile. And unfortunately, not everybody is fortunate enough to have a garage. Or maybe you have the family member who has the vehicle that is capable of running and it's parked in your driveway. So if people can show a valid registration and it runs under its own power, would that
And
be
I think
excluded from the
I think
derelict vehicle?
that's I think that there's a section about that. So
Okay.
ultimately what we're looking for is a bit of, this is somewhat covered as well in the business licensing bylaws. We don't want people running their landscaping business from their house with all of their landscaping equipment, right? You're not meant to be running a home occupancy
Yeah.
business with excessive amounts of equipment in your yard. If you have excessive amounts of equipment, you should be renting a space.
Yeah.
Right, because it does impact your neighbors. It does cause, depending on where the trailer is parked, and I know that Councillor Charney had brought this up, and we're going to be addressing it in the as we bring the traffic bylaw forward, is that we have a lot of recreational vehicles that are parked in our right of ways.
Yeah.
And they actually are significant hazard, not just operationally, but when people are pulling out.
Yeah.
Of driveways, they're a significant hazard.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't leave a lot of room between the roadway and where they can see, right? So if some small child on a bike gets run over,
That's, yeah.
right?
And that I agree with. I'm only asking because there are some people, myself included, that own more than one. They are licensed and they run under their own power. It's not considered derelict, but I wanted to
Exactly.
clarify because it's perfectly functionable, licensed, insured even. But there's a lot of people who have ATVs, snowmobiles and things, and they work, but maybe they just look old or something. And
Yeah, and that's where we give the bylaw officer some discretion, right? If an ATV has been sitting somewhere and it's falling apart, the seat's
Yeah.
been eaten out by wild animals,
yeah.
it's got cobwebs on it, and it's starting to look unsightly.
Yeah.
That's another issue, right? So
Okay.
we want to make sure that the bylaw officers have the ability to deal with, because right now, the way it was previously written was that you had to meet 3 criteria to be considered derelict. Really, we just want you to meet 1 criteria.
Mhm.
Because not, we have certainly properties where there are multiple vehicles derelict but they don't meet
Unoperational.
all 3, they might run, but they haven't been registered
For some time.
in like 10 years and they're kind of falling apart, but the engine will turn over.
Yeah.
Right? So we want to make sure that the bylaw officer has the ability to deal with those properties that are becoming unsightly because of vehicles rather than generally unsightly, because right now we can't make people remove those vehicles because we didn't have a good definition of a derelict vehicle.
Okay, because
So,
that's the only concern, because sometimes people just have a vehicle, they only run for 6 months of the year.
yeah.
Yeah.
You've got
And
your
it-
nice summer car, your little
Or
sporty
maybe,
one.
and you have your motor home or your vacation trip.
Ed, regarding the alleys, is that supposed to be the city's maintenance issue or? And I'm particularly thinking about the alleyway between 7-Eleven and post office because it is ridiculously rubbish city.
So technically, if for garbage is coming out of your bin, that is your responsibility.
Well, I take care of 2 huge lots. I don't
Mhm.
have a problem in mine, but
Mhm.
between those 2,
Mhm. Yeah, and so that might be something that Wes is gonna, our bylaw officer will do the bylaw enforcement, because if we had to pick up garbage from every bin that the Ravens got
yeah,
into,
but it's not Ravens,
Yeah.
it's just
yeah.
junk.
And so if it's coming out of your bin, it's your responsibility to clean up.
Well, and
I
then,
get it, but I'm not talking about stuff coming out of the bin. I'm talking about garbage coming from 7-Eleven or those sitting on the back porch of the post office. And the wind comes around and it swirls all around and it's always a mess.
Mhm.
yeah. I think that would be,
I don't like going down there.
Well, and again, some of that is the occupier of the property's responsibility.
I'll bet you the staff at the post office will say it's not our stuff.
Well, it will be quickly.
or even the 7-Eleven, the
Yeah.
clients may be throwing the garbage on the street.
And again,
This
part of it
process.
is, we had at one point, we had somebody blocking off one of our alleyways. They had built their fence right through the alleyway.
Can't do that.
But we also don't want, so you can't do that, right? And we also don't want people growing trees in the alleyway because they have decided that their yard is gonna encroach on public lands. So there is a responsibility to make sure that you, as a resident, are keeping your alleyway clean, whether or not it's your driveway entrance but if for some reason a fire truck had to go down there and the alleyway was congested with garbage or with plantings, then we would have one less way to fight fires. Right? And so and I think that might be again, it's challenging. There are a lot of bylaw issues, especially because we've had to take on dealing with encampments and things like that. That it's hard for our single bylaw officer to do this. And then in the winter, there's some things that are easier to do, and then the summer, but so I'll talk to bylaw and see if they want to identify some of those particularly poor spaces where people are not cleaning up and what we can do to make cleanup happen.
I don't think it's necessarily the transient people that are doing that. I think it's just they don't care.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you know what? If it looks like garbage, people are just gonna make it worse.
Yeah,
I know, yeah. I got a few things here on page 27, red A. The storage location or accumulation of visible to a person standing. What does that mean?
Visible something to the person.
Yes.
so what section?
A in red.
Unsightly point A.
The
Unsightly.
storage location or accumulation of visible what
blank.
to a person standing on a public highway.
Visible
Something is missing there.
garbage, visible
Refuse, maybe, rubbish, perhaps.
rubbish.
Something unsightly.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'll
You'll fix that one?
sorry, it's unsightly, it is 10, what? 10?
It's
Under-
under unsightly red, A, the very first
Page
sentence.
3 of 15.
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
Visible to a person standing on a public highway or nearby property. So,
No, the storage location or accumulation of visible what?
To a person.
oh, okay. Yeah, sorry,
Okay.
you're right. Yep.
Okay, now on, prohibitions, noise regulations, under B in red, allow an animal or bird under control. Okay, I get that. Now, I've had several people talk to me about these pigeons.
Mhm.
Now, does this come somewhere else? But
That's
people,
wildlife.
no. They're bringing their homing pigeons into Merritt. They're releasing them. The young ones get all screwed up. So they go into people's yards. These people enter, you are working on it, so
Yeah.
I can forget this?
It's something, it'll be dealt with separately, because it's already covered under, there's some of it that's covered under the animal
Control,
protection legislation, right? Logan Lake actually put out a really good community communication about that, because there isn't a lot they can do. If someone's in your yard, call the RCMP,
Mhm.
right? If an unknown person's in your yard, please call the
This
RCMP.
is animal cruelty too.
Yeah, but that's right. So the ones where they tie them to the platform, that's considered animal cruelty.
Mhm.
So there are things, and we just have to kind of figure out where we stand and how we're gonna try. And again, of course, they only come on Saturdays and Sundays.
Yep, that's
So-
when no bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay,
Just so you know, I have contacted the SPCA on this. They do not consider pigeons anything that they would take care of.
oh my God.
But I've also contacted the Carrier Pigeon Racing Association, and none of these people are registered with them. So this is an unaffiliated group from the coast. And Logan Lake and us and a few Ashcroft, we're all dealing with this situation. The situation that I have is, first of all, you take a white bird, you paint it pink, and it's a yearling, and you bring it here to see if it'll fly back. You should be able to come back within the 4 or 5 days and pick your damn bird up. Don't leave a white bird painted pink, because every hawk, whatever, will take care of this quite quickly.
Mhm.
It's inhumane to be doing this. And there are points and times where some of these people will stomp on a bird right in front of everybody and throw it in the bush. That's got to come to an end. So we are working on that to try and get something done with this.
Okay, perfect. Okay, part 3, property maintenance,
Mhm.
F. Second sentence, except where, not there. Huh? Page
Oh, yeah.
30,
Except where,
30,
yeah.
except where.
Thank you.
Now, what did we go on saying recreation? Are we still maintaining one recreation, or are we gonna look
It's
at?
2. I believe it's supposed to be 2, and I'll have to check again.
And
No, 1 recreation vehicle, and we'll have to better define recreational vehicle potentially. As a camper motorhome versus a ATV motorcycle.
Utility
You may,
trailer.
you may want to turn
Utility
it, you may
trailer.
want to, instead of saying recreational vehicle, you may want to say caravan. Because universally, that's what they're called,
Yeah,
caravans.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is too, is that I know that you said that we have contained in a building, that would be okay, but the
Mhm.
problem is so many people don't have a garage. Or if they have a garage, they use it for storage. So
Yeah.
a lot of people have to park in them.
Well, I mean, I guess the concept is that the reason for this is you can't store all of your friends' RVs
At your house.
at your house, is really what this is about. Your house cannot become an RV storage area. Right? Or a trailer storage area of any kind. And
I
that's
mean,
sometimes what happens.
There are, like, I mean, I can think of a house that's perfectly well maintained and everything, but they happen to buy 2 motorhomes. And one is for sale, but it's taken a long time. Sometimes people
Got a
just
good
love
deal
one so much that they have a hard time parting with the other. But you'd never question the home for maintenance, because it's actually perfectly locked and maintained and
Yeah.
lawn mowed and. well,
Mhm.
Hey,
And I also have,
caravan, man. Stop it.
I have concerns about this vacant building. I have a semi-vacant. It's not going to be vacant much longer, so I guess I can talk about it.
Well, it's a seasonal dwelling.
It's, yeah, I mean, it's furnished. But the thing is, I look at someone who has a home. In our case, it was flooded. Did dick squat with it for quite a while because we didn't know what we were going to do with it, but we maintained the yard. It's not, doesn't look like it's abandoned or.
It's a guest house.
Yeah, the kids come. They sleep in there, get rid of them, go over there. But I think that you're comparing a house that's not occupied with a derelict.
No,
So what is the point of, a house that maybe I just want that house, it's there for the property value. You
We're in a
know,
housing crisis.
but not in Merritt,
Yes,
really.
100% we are in a housing crisis in Merritt, 100%. Canadian Friendship Center has 50 families on their wait list for appropriate housing that they can afford. 50 families. We just confirmed that with Canadian. So for affordable housing, 50 families. We have families in our mobile homes which we have to sell, and they may not be able to purchase those homes. They may be costed out. And so as a result, those families at the end of 2025 will need to find alternate housing.
Yeah.
They're in those houses because they can't find alternate housing.
So what you're doing is you are forcing someone to make a decision of long-term rental or short-term rental or be fined.
Not fined, there's a service fee, right? Because if you are, let's say, and we have to treat everyone equal, right? So I can't say because you're a resident of the community, I'm going to treat you differently than somebody who owns a home in our community who lives on the coast and is choosing to just leave it empty because they bought it cheap and it was an investment that they can maybe use later on, right? So we have empty land and empty homes in our community that are not being used to the benefit of our community by people who may not care about our community because it was just an investment property. And what we're seeing is that is what's resulting in some of these housing shortages is that and so in Vancouver, under the Vancouver Charter, they're allowed to tax vacant lands and vacant homes. We're not allowed to under the community charter. So we're instituting a fee because if your house catches on fire, we're monitoring those things, right? Like there's nobody around to tell us your house is on fire. There's a lot of risk to having these vacant properties. They're getting broken into, which means every time, let's say a fire affected house near my place gets the door kicked in regularly. Every time that happens, fire department has to go clear the house. We have to get the contractor to lock up the doors and put the wood up again. We have to, so there's a lot of work that goes into the city dealing with vacant properties and vacant houses. And so to cost recover from people who have the privilege, the privilege to have the money to invest in that stuff and not use it to the benefit of the community. This is how we cost recover some of those extra times and fees or rates that we pay. Because, we have a lot of property that's owned from people that are never going to do anything with it. It sits there. Can't grow a community with land that won't get sold or built
No,
on.
I understand that, but I mean, aside from my situation, because we're in that house every day. But if we're now in a situation where we're taking someone's individual home that they have purchased, whether they are saving it for their child, for their grandchild, or for an investment. We are now as a community telling them what they have to do on that piece of property over and above what we normally tell them. And, I kind of take offense to that type of treatment to people. I think that they should have the choice of whether they want to long-term rental, which heaven forbid, short-term rental, or maintain it and keep it looking nice and leave it vacant.
Now, in the definition, it says vacant more than 60 days at a time. So if you have people who are up monthly, that wouldn't really fit the definition of vacant because they're away. They're here for a week, then they go down and work. It'd be like people who work away, right? Like when I look at this definition, I would say that if her niece who used it last in the summer or whatever, because they do come up, and there's.
So let's not.
And I'm not using,
specific
I don't want to use her as an
We don't
example.
want it to become a conflict.
No,
It
but
could
what
be,
I'm
yeah.
saying is if someone else is the same situation, they come up for spring fishing, they come up for hunting, they come up for Christmas, they come up for
Regularly visiting.
whatever, they regularly visit, but they don't live in it.
That's
That's
You know,
not
so-
the typical situation. The typical situation is people are buying these things cheap.
And sitting.
and sitting
empty.
on them.
Yeah.
We have a ton of industrial and commercial and light industrial land that, for instance, the property on Pooley that we had to cut most of the other day. We cut more than half of that property the other day, that came to council the other day. We cut more than half of those 13 acres. That property is valuable and nothing is happening with it. We could be bringing in more investors into the community, increasing property taxes on that property, offsetting property taxes that are being borne by residents by having that land in play. And we have investors, not just local investors, but investors from all over the world who are picking up property cheap and not doing anything with it.
Yeah.
And it means the city cannot grow
So-
because we are confined, right? We can't grow outside these boundaries.
So on my street, I have a gentleman who was affected by the flood. The house has no walls, no nothing. It's just, it's been empty for 3 years. If you go down 4 houses, a great big, huge, brand new, gigantic house that was built 5 years ago has never had a single person ever live in it or walk through the door.
Yeah.
So here's this giant house that probably could house 4 families that has sat empty for 4 or 5 years and no one's ever lived in it.
That home was on the market.
It's still on the market,
still on the
but
market.
So,
the market price is insane. So no one's ever, it's a fishing expedition. That's what I call it, right? But you look at something like that and you think somebody could be in that house. Sure, he pays taxes on it. I get that. But the point of the matter is that house is empty and it could be very well used. And then the gentleman across the street from me, his house is a shell, a complete and utter shell. There's nothing left inside.
I agree in maybe those situations, but I'm not picking on the other houses where they're seasonal use, where the families go
Oh.
back and forth for secondary home, or maybe for medical reasons they're in Vancouver a lot.
You know what? I'm not going to disagree with, but I kind of see Councillor Charney's point a little bit. If I have managed to maneuver my life to the point where I can have a second home for my family when I choose to have some vacation time, that should be my right to do so. And I shouldn't be dictated on what I can do with what I've decided to buy.
And I agree
So I
with your
do
point.
agree with Councillor Charney a little bit on this. And that's why I've got my hackles up with the BC government's new housing policy. Because who are you to tell me what to do with the money that I have made and the decisions that I have made for my house?
And the thing is, they're forcing you into residential tenancy branch, which is, it is tenant biased and it's ridiculous. And that's why there's a housing shortage, because who wants to deal with the residential tenancy branch?
The renters have all the rights.
The renters have the rights, the landlords have nothing. They trash your house and, oh, I'm sorry. You know, I mean,
Can't
that
get
last renter in that house
Yeah,
trashed that house. I mean, she had a dance pole in the middle of the living room. Even the dog wouldn't even sniff it, you know? Oh, I know. I'll tell you, we had a lot of good laughs over that thing. But I mean, she destroyed that house. And then the flood came and destroyed it more. But I just find it hard. If someone's purchased something, whether it's vacant land or it's a house, that we come along and say, you are going to do this with that piece of, and that's when Vancouver came up with that, or the BC government. I'm going, oh my God, we're little dictators here, telling people what they have to do with their piece of property. It's like the people that bought condos in Kelowna specifically for retirement purposes. And that's what it was being used for. And now the government came along and said, you can't do that anymore. You know, I find that type of overreach a little much.
Disallowing the short-term rentals in Kelowna or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, the short-term rentals, you can't have the short-term rentals anymore.
But the one thing that you've seen too is that this has now affected the tourism business.
Yeah.
It's
That's right.
really affected tourism business, and this summer was a prime example. I think Kelowna's tourism was down close to 40% because there's no short-term rentals.
You exchange one problem for another. CEO.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is council's decision about the vacant buildings and vacant lands. I will say again, there are additional services that we have to provide, like our bylaw officers have to monitor many of these vacant lands because again, and some of these vacant houses regularly to ensure that they don't become unsightly, because many of these vacant landlords just assume that we've become their maintenance service
Mhm.
because they don't care.
Or squatters even.
or squatters, but we end up with a lot of
Yeah.
these empty spots that these are some of the ones that become the most problematic where we're cutting the
See, there's
grass
a
and
difference
we're,
between vacant and derelict
well, derelict,
or
yes,
unsightly.
unsightly, but we spend time monitoring them to ensure that they don't become unsightly. Right? Because that's very offensive for the neighborhood.
Mhm.
Right? We want to ensure that the neighbors are not living in a place where, the weeds next door to me are 7 feet tall. I lost my kid in the neighbor's front yard because she can't find her way out through the weeds, right? Like, so we spend a lot of and then there's some fire risk around this stuff. So a lot of additional staff time is going into that could be going into other things. And so that's one of the reasons, like, this is a way to, in some ways, it's a way to promote development, right? We can't tax them differently. In other jurisdictions, you can tax vacant properties differently. So if somebody's sitting on, a whole subdivision worth of land, in some jurisdictions, like other provinces, you can tax them differently than developed land. You can't do that in BC. So how do we incentivize or disincentivize vacant lands? Right, because it seems to me that attempts to get vacant lands built through subsidies or developed through subsidies in the community hasn't necessarily been successful. So do we disincentivize vacant lands instead of
But you're
incentivizing?
basically touching on buildings. You're not really.
No, there's a
touching-
section on lands.
Was there?
That's what I'm looking for too. I don't. see-
Yeah,
There's supposed to be a section on that.
and anyway, 15.9 should be into and not info.
Uh,
Yeah, because I see,
Cause all
you're
this
the
stuff.
building and structures,
all this-
buildings.
Yeah, it's all this, section 15 deals with buildings.
buildings.
And then in part 16, you jumped into, all of a sudden it's just
fine.
general.
Yeah, oh, well, I'm sorry, I must have missed something because it is meant to be lands.
Yeah,
and
because we don't have that.
properties. I apologize. It's actually meant to be both.
So 15.9,
It
did you
should be
get that?
properties, vacant properties.
Did you get that into and not
15.9.
Second sentence, less than a monthly basis into a vacant building. And then on 15.17, third to last, or the fourth line, they, not the, may seek reconsideration.
We just leave those in there for you.
See if you read it.
But I mean, when I read this, I see it completely different than, like a house that's been burnt out and unrepaired.
Yeah,
They're
me
not,
too.
they're not targeting a house where there's visitors. on
Yeah, and
regular.
I think
It's-
ultimately in the end, we're going to have a different discussion about fire affected and flood affected houses and services to those residences, right? And how we manage those. So we're putting something together for you about that.
This is just the starting.
Yeah, and it's not going to be necessarily included in this bylaw. It's just going to be council saying, I'm sorry, but this sort of grace period is over. For
I know, that's why my heat's going in. I know it's coming.
people.
How much longer are we gonna be, guys?
Anything else in this one? Again, we'll bring some stuff back for you on this one. It doesn't have to go right to council.
I think we'd also be maybe having questions on the fees as well, but
Those will come in the rates and fees bylaw, because we don't want to have rates and fees in all of our bylaws, because then every time we want to increase rates or fees, we have to change all the bylaws that are
bylaw,
affected by
okay.
that. That's why we consolidate them all into one bylaw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, as long as we can address the vehicle
Yeah.
situation and clarify vacancy and rec vehicle, everything like that, then I'm happy with that if we're gonna bring it back or if we're.
We'll bring it back to you guys, yeah.
Excellent.
And I think 18.2 is supposed to be in red. I think that is a new.
But I do appreciate the discussion because at least I feel better about it.
Yeah, maybe,
So-
yeah, possibly.
18.2 in red, and then I've got
Yeah,
one other
okay.
that should be in red.
To read.
I think 9.4. It might be red too.
Okay, we'll check those ones. Thank you.
Okay, so on that note, I think if we're gonna have that brought back, then we'll have another revision of this. So I think at this point, we've had a good discussion on on our
Good luck,
flight.
Dana.
Okay.
Yeah, good luck.
Dana. Thank you.
For the eye surgeries, yeah. Nobody's lasering, nobody's ever lasering my
But it's
eyeballs.
not lasering. Isn't lasering, you just walk out and you're great? Hers is, what is hers?
Yeah. Yeah, so on that note, since we've addressed everything, I think we have no information items. So now we're at number 6, termination of meeting. So this meeting is concluded. Thanks, everyone.